Albert and I are out for a spin in the new Panamera. In fact, it's Panamera 4, so it's the base model but with four-wheel drive. I know, I should have got the turbo model with the splitting spoiler and all the fancy engine and everything, and we'll get to that model soon enough. Why I went for this one is because this is of more interest to more people. Well, everyone would like to get the top of the line model. Most Panameras are either the base model or the Panamera 4. And before we get on to this one, let's touch on the old model for a moment. The original Panamera, which ran from 2010 to 2017. It was a pretty nice, comfortable car, but for my money, it was the worst driving Porsche there was, particularly the base model or the Panamera 4. Just terrible. So I had three big problems with the original Panamera, or at least the base model and the Panamera 4. And the first was the engine. The engine was always lackluster. Just didn't have enough power and didn't really have enough torque down low. You know, this new engine, this new turbocharged 3-litre that's in this car, isn't that much more powerful, both in torque and horsepower, but because the torque is available right from the get-go, right from the lowest RPMs, you never get caught out of that power band, and it makes all the difference to this car. The second thing was the handling. Man, the handling in the original Panamera, even with the sport suspension, was never that great. This one, oh, so much better. I'm on the highway now. I'll try and get into a back road later on, but yeah, with the dampeners in the softest mode, it's got a little bit of roll. If I put it into the stiffer mode, boy, it stiffens right up. It makes such a big difference. Immediately, it feels more like a big fat sports car, like a GT car. Yeah, it really makes a big difference to how enjoyable this car is to drive, that it's not rolling around like a pig on a skateboard. And thirdly, and probably the biggest one for me, is the looks. I was never a fan of the original Panamera looks. Even the facelift model didn't really improve things for it. It just had odd dimensions and it always looked kind of phallic to me. Yeah, I just never liked the looks, and I think a lot of people felt that way, and that's why the sales were never as popular as I think Porsche would have liked. Whereas this new model, even though the size is much the same, they've really done a great job with the looks. Just tightening it up here and there and making the lights smaller, and everything they've done with the looks of this car have substantially improved how this car looks. I think it's now a handsome GT car. But today, I'm actually going to do less driving in this car and more talking about the interior, because what's interesting about the Panamera is that it is the model leader for styling changes within Porsche. That is, switchgear and styling and overall cabin interior, whatever they do in the Panamera flows down to every other model, right down to the Macan, and then starts again with the Panamera again. So for the next 7 to 12 years, this is going to be the switchgear and everything we see in all Porsches going forward. So this is interesting not just for new Panamera drivers, but it's going to be the new Cayenne, and of course in 2019 it's going to be in the new Porsche 911, the 992. So I want to spend a bit more time on the details of this car, the cabin details of this car, so we know what to expect in all the other Porsche models coming up, I think, which will be interesting to all of us. Here's a quick corner. See, it takes the corner so much better than the older model. Down we go, catching up with the Sentra. Yeah, for a big car, boy, this thing handles now. Okay, so we're back home and we're going to take a closer look at the interior of this Panamera 4, which of course sets the tone for all Porsche vehicles going forward. And really what they've done is they've changed everything to this piano black keys. Everywhere you see is this very striking piano black, which is nice, but also leaves a lot of fingerprints everywhere. If you have a closer look at this, can you see that? See where my dirty fingerprints have gone on there? So, I'll be taking a little rub cloth wherever I go. And the big change here, of course, is, Porsches have always been big button cars, just buttons galore, 20, 30 buttons in this center area. So now it looks like there's hardly any buttons. But of course what they've done is they've just hidden the buttons really. So if I turn the ignition on and start the car, so as you can see, the lights come up in place of buttons these days, which looks so much tidier. I really love this new look. It really is very modern, but it does have some shortcomings. For example, how it works is, so this is all one panel. So you can see it moves when I touch it, but it doesn't actually click unless you put your finger on one of these buttons. For example, if I put it on the sport mode button, then you get the click. Hear that? Whereas if I put it beside the sport mode button, you don't get a click. So it recognizes that your finger's on a button and allows you to click. And it's not as satisfying as a regular button, but not a big deal. It's certainly nice to tidy this whole area up. In fact, tidy the whole car up with this piano black look. But thankfully they have left buttons for the temperature and the fan speed, which is a huge relief, because there's nothing more annoying than trying to hit a screen to turn up the temperature or the fan speed. I'm talking to you, Audi. So yeah, these buttons have got a nice feel to them, but they're the only remaining buttons. And that piano black theme is on all the buttons, which, if you like the look of it, which I do, it's pretty nice. And of course this is a more modern look and a nice clean look, but there was really nothing wrong with the old buttons. I kind of like the look of the old buttons as well. And that piano black look extends all the way to the stalks as well. Here's the indicator stalk. Once again, it's just going to get fingerprints all over it, so we'll wipe it down here. But yeah, flat piano look. And onto the gauges, which are a huge change. Obviously, if you remember, if you look back at my car, we had one multifunction display and everything else was analog. Now it's analog in the center, and I really like this new dial. It's very pretty. And two big screens either side, which can either mimic 4 analog gauges or any number of other things. If we go through modes here, we get the different things. So it's nice. I personally am going to miss analog gauges a little bit. I love analog gauges, especially in sports cars. But this does give more information, and they're very high resolution, as you can see. And of course you can configure them to have all manner of information on there. And the actual speedometer, aside from this one, people just look at the center one in Porsches, and it's now a beautiful OLED display, and that is a big improvement. The resolution on there is very nice. And of course the steering wheel, the 918 steering wheel that we all love so much, has had a minor change as well. 2 extra buttons per side, so 4 extra buttons on the wheel now, so this has become a little larger. The reason why there's extra buttons is because this scroll wheel, which used to be the volume scroll wheel, now changes what you see in the left hand high resolution display, and this one does the right hand. So now the volume's these 2 buttons here. Over to the gear selector. This is certainly something that I'm not so enamored with, although I'm sure I'd get used to it. The problem I have with this is that it's a little fiddly. It doesn't move very far, and it doesn't show what gear you're actually in. You have to, you know, you're used to, when you see these displays in cars, you normally see a little light showing what you're actually what gear you're in, but you actually have to look up here to the speedometer to find out what gear you're in. Add to that, it can be a little fiddly getting it into the right gear, but I think it's just practice. Certainly in the day that I've had this car, I keep finding myself going, what gear am I meant to be in? Yeah, I find that a little fiddly, but otherwise it's comfortable enough. And of course you've got the park brake down here. And onto the giant center screen, like a big television in your living room. We like a big wide screen, and this one's a nice contrast, very bright, very easy to read. It can just be a little intimidating to find all the information and get to the systems you want, because there's lots of different ways of doing it. You can either use the buttons along here, or you can scroll up and down the side menu here and get to the things you want. What's interesting about the buttons along the top console here is that they function differently than the buttons down here. That is, down here when you press a button, you can feel the button console move, and it makes the clicking sound. Up here there's no movement, but it makes the clicking sound. So it's strange that there's no consistency to the buttons in this car. I hope they tidy that up in other models. And if you want to try and keep your fingers off the screen, you can do most things by clicking on here and then scrolling with the scroll wheel here. Confusingly, this looks like a volume button. So everybody reaches for this to turn down the volume, because don't you think that looks like a volume button? But of course, here's the volume button for the radio. Yeah, just a few oddities about the styling and the decisions they made. But probably the strangest engineering choice was this center vent. This kind of flimsy bit of plastic in the center here. Talk about the most over-engineered thing in a car I've ever seen. So it's just a vent, and it should work just like any other vent, like this one over here, where you've got a toggle and you can move it backwards and forwards and up and down, just like cars have for decades. No, let's over-engineer this thing. So it's got its own menu, the center vent menu. Here we are, and it brings up this screen here, and it can tell you whether you want the air coming out as focused or diffused, how much air is coming out. But interestingly, which direction the air is pointing in is dictated by moving this toggle here around. And annoyingly, it doesn't do it instantly. It takes a second or two for it to catch up. So if I like move this across this way and you look at the vent, it sort of makes its way across. And so getting it the air where you want it can be a little frustrating, because you move it over and it doesn't blow, so you move it more, then you're going too far. Just because it's half a second behind your movement, it's tricky to get the air where you want. You know, how hard would it have just been to put a toggle on there? Crazy. I hope this silly feature doesn't make it to other models of Porsche, because this is just a waste of engineering, if you ask me. It's so annoying. See, once it's closed, you can see fingerprints on it. Once again, the damn fingerprints. And it just looks cheap. I don't know. That's my least favorite part of this new interior, is that silly center vent. And as for the rest of the interior, you know, Porsche does a good job, even when you're not getting leather. So this is the non-leather interior. It's obviously leather on the seats and leather on the steering wheel and leather in the center part here, but there's no leather along the top here or along the edges. And where it's rubber instead of leather, they make it look like leather. And Porsche does such a good job of doing that, you know. Their interiors are always very nice. And this is certainly a big lift in the interiors, and certainly made the interior look a lot less busy, because the buttons all disappear until you turn it on. And then there are these nice piano black buttons. Oh, one more thing, the new key. So the Panamera introduces the new shape key. If you remember, since 2010, they've had a key that's shaped like a car, which I'm sure everyone thought was fantastic at the time, but becomes a bit of a pain in the ass when you want to put it in your pocket and it sticks out like a lump in your pocket. So they made it flat. Still sort of the shape of a car, maybe a car that's been flattened by a big wheel. Yeah, anything they can do to make the key smaller, fine by me. Okay, let's jump in the back and have a look in the back. So here we are in the back seat, and Panamera is one of the most comfortable cars to sit in the back seat. It's a very sporty rear seat. If you're taking a lot of high-speed corners in this car, you'll be fine sitting in the back seat. Yeah, very sporty seats. As you can see, they've got some decent-sized bolsters on these seats for the rear passenger. Obviously, only 2 passengers, and the passengers get a few little toys as well. In this case, this is a very low-spec car, but you still get heated seats, and you get a button for changing the visor on the sunroof here. And I'm 6 foot tall, and I've got enough headroom just. So most people will be perfectly comfortable, or very comfortable, in these very snugly rear seats. Oh, William, what are you doing back here, buddy? So you can see, just like in the old Panamera, there's plenty of room. It's not a deep trunk, but it's a nice long trunk. Plenty of room for 4 gorillas back here, as long as they're willing to have their head squashed. Okay, let's close this up again. This is a form of gorilla abuse, I think. So this is the new Panamera and Panamera 4, and I have to say it's just a huge improvement. Mostly due to the engine. You know, this new turbocharged 3-litre engine is just a far more suitable engine for this size vehicle, don't you think, Albert? Makes all the difference, having that torque available so low and not having to have the engine rev in order to get that torque. It just suits this vehicle a lot more, just makes it a lot smoother to drive. And a lot more relaxing. You're not having to beat on the car to get the performance you want. The power's always there, or it feels like it's always there, because that torque is available from so low down in the rev range. Secondly, of course, the handling's improved, and that's noticeable, and of course now the electronic dampeners really make a big difference, whereas before it wasn't so noticeable. But thirdly, and definitely the most important thing, is that they have substantially improved the looks of this car. It is a far better looking vehicle these days. I was never impressed with the previous model. This one is a handsome GT car, no doubt about it. And I wanted to sign off once again by saying, look, if you're having trouble getting the deal on your Porsche, let me know. I can put you in contact with the people that I deal with, and they've been able to help quite a few people now get that discount they're looking for and ship the car directly to them. Even if you're not in the Connecticut area, you know, they've been quite good at helping quite a few people that are not getting the deal from their local dealership. So if you're buying a Porsche, you're not getting the deal or the service you're looking for, let me know. I can put you in contact with a couple of people that can make that happen for you. Anyway, Albert and I thank you guys for watching. I will try and review the Panamera Turbo and the new Cayenne when it comes out shortly. All interesting cars. We're big Porsche fans here on the Nick Murray YouTube channel, as always. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.